Hello, welcome back. If you've been here before, if not, hi, my name is David. I make videos talking about media that I want to talk about. This is my thoughts, ideas, and theories series for the next 4 episodes of the Magnus Protocol, which is a horror podcast produced by Rusty Quill and created by Jonathan Johnny Sims and Alexander J. Newell. In this crop of episodes, I'll be covering 39 to 42. I've already covered the first season of Magnus Protocol doing this type of format, and I've also already covered the first 8 episodes of season 2 as well, so check those out as well before this one, I guess, because there will be spoilers, obviously, heavy spoilers for everything here. I'll also put out a season 2 primer that has some of the information that I'll be referring to here so that you're familiar with the lore that I'm trying to talk about here. This episode was, I loved it. I absolutely adored. I'll say it later, but like Billy Hindle is an amazing voice actress, and I adored this episode. So, without further ado, episode 39, Dependence, CATXXX dash the dates X's. The description is error, parentheses unknown source. The CATXXXXXXXXXXXX is non-applicable, and the rank is non-applicable. The DPHW's death, pain, helplessness, and weird are all X, non-applicable. The date of the incident is non-applicable, and the date of assessment is non-applicable. Yes, this is, again, an exact episode description as episode 37, Scrutiny, and 34 eliminations. And so they need to start differentiating these episodes, because come on. The author of this episode is Alexander J. Newell. This aired April 24th, 2025. Brief summary, archives Alice, and the entities are buried in the flesh. In scene 1, it's a tape recorder. All of these scenes will be through a tape recording. We are coming off of the last conversation Georgie and Sam had, and with Melanie as well, that the next lead that they have to trying to figure out what the archivist wants, let's go try to find Alice. If Sam encountered people in archives in his universe, then there should be people in his universe in archives universe. So they go to Alice's parents' house, and he recognizes the address from when he helped Alice move her parents' stuff out when they died. He sort of questions, maybe her parents are still alive, and Georgie says that old generations are less likely to make it through after the incursion, so probably not. They ring the doorbell, no one answers, and so Georgie goes in by herself. She wants to do a scope out of the place before, and as Sam waits, we hear like disturbances in the house and like muffled conversation. It was really good, like background sound, I guess, soundscape of like hearing Georgie and Alice speaking to each other in the house, and it sounded, and you can just sort of hear exactly what they're saying, almost. And Alice appears, she comes out, and she's like, oh my god, and she goes up and kisses him, and the transcript told me that that's when they kiss, but when I listened to it, I was like, he makes a little sound, and I figured it was sort of like a gasp, but no, Sam makes a little moan, and that's when Alice and him are kissing, and it's like, come on, Johnny, come on, Alex, make him sloppy kiss, come on. In scene 2, it's later in the day, and the transcript says they're in the kitchen, and this is after they've explained the differences of the dimensions, that Sam is from a different dimension and Alice is from this dimension, etc., etc. She apologizes for kissing, and Sam says that he and Alice are not together in his dimension, but they do work together, which is a little awkward for her. And she says that she and Sam were married a month before the incursion. And after Towerfall, Sam had appendicitis, and with a lack of doctors and medicine, that's how he died. So Sam says that in his universe, in his dimension, he also had appendicitis, but he survived. And Alice says that they shared a domain during the incursion. Georgie says that many couples did, because many couples share different fears, which is a really cool concept. And Georgie asks if Alice dreams, with like an emphasis on the like dreams, so like a capital D, TM, dreams. And at first, Alice gets a little defensive, and Georgie says she saw nitrazepane, nitrazepane on her shelf, which I had to look up. It is a sedative sleep aid. And they say that couples or people who just shared domains were left connected after the fact, and that they shared dreams. And Georgie warns Sam that the dreams were nightmares, not as bad, obviously, like the domains, but people still played around with it, having these dreams that they shared with each other. And Sam asks Alice, what did they dream about together? So Alice begins her statement, and this is this really beautiful, horrifying tale that's a little absurd as well, because it starts when she leaves the sales floor. There's a woman who wants her to get something, and she's like, fuck off, whatever. She goes to the back rooms, and she gets tangled in like the faux velvet curtains. And that's where the entire thing happens, is she's tangled in cloth. And that felt somewhat absurd, like taking a step back and looking at it and being like, do you need help getting out of those cloths? Anyways, it does get worse though, so at least there's that. She gets stuck in the cloth and she gets trapped in it, and she's losing her strength, and she eventually just gives in, and she hears a heart beating, strong and like overwhelming noise around her, and she realizes that it's no longer cloth that is trapping her, but flesh that is trapping her. And she feels pressure all around, and then she feels this internal thing that does not belong. She calls it like some sort of grit. And she realizes it's herself trapped in a living tomb. And she surrenders herself to her flesh, and it's painful. And Sam is there too now, and they are together again. It's horrifying, but at least they're together. And she says at the very end of it, even now you are there waiting to suffer with me once more. I cannot give this statement the justice that it needs. It is horrifyingly dreamlike and descriptive. And this is another instance of Alexander J. Newell's lists horror. He just lists stuff and it's horrifying. And then the tape just cuts off. And we start in scene 3, also a little later, as Georgie and Sam are like packing up kinda and like about to leave. Alice pleads for them to stay, but Georgie is insistent and wants to go. Sam doesn't think it's a good idea to stay either, and she like wants him to stay, and she's desperate for him to stay. Eventually she's like, yeah, okay, you have to go, but can you please come back to me? She's pleading for something good. Georgie practically has to pull Sam out of that, and they're like walking away quickly, trying to avoid any more conversation with Archives Alice. Georgie says that the dreamers are broken. She says something snapped, and now they'd rather linger in a nightmare that they think they belong in than face an uncertain reality. Georgie says it's dangerous, and they can't afford people shutting down like that. And Sam sees it as love, but Georgie knows that it's grief. And then Georgie just wants to get back to the compound. She's frustrated that they have had no leads whatsoever. Nothing was gained from this excursion, and time was wasted. So she just wants to get home now. As they're walking back, Sam asks if Alice was more articulated than they expected, and she agrees. And they look at each other and they're like, it's probably the archivist doing something, right? And so she wants to get a patrol to get a sweep in case the archivist is around. And she opens up her backpack, and we hear like the sound become a little bit more clearer, and she discovers a tape recorder inside her backpack. And she said she's an idiot because she had checked every single room in Alice's house just in case there was a tape recorder, but she didn't check her backpack. And they run back to Alice's house as the archivist begins to form. I assume that she sort of tosses the tape out, and they're like, let's go. And then they leave, and the tape stays there. And then you do hear like whispers starting to form. And that's the archivist appearing. And then the episode ends. It's a really short one, actually. It feels longer, but it's pretty short. So, notes. Shout out to Billy Hindle. There's a thing in Archives and Protocol that I can't really like describe, but it's sort of like, we get used to John in Archives and Chester/Norris in Protocol, that any other new voices stand out a lot, and especially when it's a main character giving their first statement. So, like when Sasha and Martin gave their statements in season 1, Tim gave a statement in season 3, Basira in season 2, but having someone who we know is a main character give a statement adds some, I don't know, adds something to the statement of itself. In Protocol, the first one we got was Gwen when she was being intoned by the archivist, and she's talking about the shed with the dead fox and stuff. That wasn't a full statement, but it was definitely like something close to it. And it was I would love to hear Anuja Battersby give more statement, And Sam in 28 Interruptions gives his statement as well, being intoned by the archivist. And here, Billy Hindle as Alice is giving an amazing performance. And every week, whenever an episode's about to come out, Anuj Bajbi and Billy Hindle on their Twitter put out posts that are like, hey, early access for patrons is out on Tuesdays. And then on Thursday, they also say, hey, it's out now for normal people who don't have money like me. And they usually post like a GIF that's like slightly connected, like, what is it? Memes without context. And this last week, Alexander J. Newell tweeted something along the lines of, hey, I want y'all to know, I'll put it up here. I'm paraphrasing right now from my memory. Like, I want y'all to know Billy Hindle had a great and easy time recording this. And then she quote tweeted it saying basically like, oh, I had to drink some tea and take a nap after this performance, which is like, yes, this is a very intense performance that you need to do, especially with the context that Alice is trans, Billy is trans, Alexander J. Newell is a cis white man writing this. He probably got some input from her, right? But it's a really great writing and amazing performance by Billy Hindle. So shout out to Billy Hindle. You have my heart. I love Alice. I love your performance. In episode 31, Compartmentalizing, Georgie asked Sam if he's a dreamer when she discovered him in the Lunging Exclusion Zone, the LEZ, the Les. And she was trying to figure out, is he a dreamer, a cultist, and then said something about like a wooden idol or something. And at that time, obviously, we're not sure what she means by that. That has meaning behind it, but we're not fully sure. And now here we get the explanation of what a dreamer is. And also similar to 37 Scrutiny with Ash. I almost said Ash Ubert, but that's Ash Ubert. Fire Emblem, that's it. Ash Pines, who could not deal with the reality of real life and begged to practically be killed by the archivist. Similar to that, here, dreamers, people who are so broken that they cannot face real life, especially with the idea that couples had the domains together, feared together, and had dreams after the fact together. And it's not outwardly spoken about, but it's definitely implied that, people died, obviously. And so people who had loved ones in the matching domains, they would use their own dreams to be able to revisit the people that they loved and that they've lost. And despite the dream being a nightmare, at least they're together, just as Alice said about Sam being there. It's implied that Archives Alice makes herself dream these nightmares just so she can be with Sam, because Sam died, or her Sam died. And that is so sad and really cool writing, really cool, consequence of the incursion. Like they're really thinking so much just what are the consequences and what are the after effects of the hell domains. And this is so, and it's like, stop making them suffer, but also that's so cool. And it's really great writing to use Alice, who is a character we know very well, to showcase how intense the plight of the dreamers are in archives and how intense the after effects of the incursion is. Also, incursion is such a cool term. Oh my god, so much better than the blip. I hate the blip in Marvel, but the incursion, stunning. Alice's dream itself, I'm not fully sure if the dream is like a replica or like something similar to what the domain that they were part of, but it's definitely pulling from those ideas. And it's buried in flesh. There's continued motifs of pressure and feeling trapped, crushed. That's very buried. But then also the ideas of skin and heat and flesh being flesh. And also body dysmorphia, because there's a moment where she's like, she feels something inside her and it's herself that doesn't belong in this in this like tomb. And there's the idea of like body dysmorphia. You know, Alice is trans and she feared not being able to become who she actually is, and she's trapped in a body that she does not want to be in. And so the flesh tends to explore ideas of body dysmorphia and body image, but most of Archives doesn't really do that. It's mostly like, oh my god, meat. But at least here we're seeing a little bit more of this thematic addition to the flesh. And the episode ends with, I assume, the archivist attacking all of a sudden, which would be really cool, because then Georgie would be like, hey, John, this isn't you. This isn't you, John. And then she actually looks at the archivist and she's like, who the fuck are you? You're not John. Or something. I don't know. I don't know how that's going to pan out, but I'm really excited for what's going to happen. I'm sorry if my voice is not at 100% right now. I'm recovering from another sickness. So hopefully by next week, I'll be much better. And I'll see you for the next episode. I've been kind of sick the last week, and I had this one fever dream where I was absolutely certain that in protocol, the wardens and the LEZ had captured the archivist and used it as like a weapon slash like a therapy tool. Like people would go to the archivist and like they would use some of its power to learn something about themselves. I don't know. I was pissed off because I was like, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel like good writing. I don't like how this was written. And I was certain that this was real, but it was a fever dream. And I guess compared to my fever dream, this episode is so very different than what I expected. And it's a really good episode too. So, episode 40, Public Image, CAT3RCA2167- the dates. Description of the episode is puppet, parentheses, reanimation, -- fear, parentheses, children. CAT3 is a catalyst, as in the wooden toy. And the rank is a CA. I think it should be a C, but we still don't know what ranks are, so oh well. DPHW, Death 2, Pain 1, Helplessness 6, Weird 7. Date of the event was November 23rd, 1762, and the date of the assessment was June 10th, 2024. The author of this episode was Jonathan Sims. The air date was May 1st, 2025. Brief summary, Heinrich Unheimlich's statement. Entities non-applicable. I'll touch on that, obviously. Most of what I will be doing, the big bulk of this section will be just talking about what happens in the episode itself. So let's get into it. Scene 1, Alice is in the Berlin airport and she meets with Dane Bowie, who is part of the Starkwell Services group. As we remember from a few episodes ago, Gwen has set up a field test, I believe it was, with Brett Lars and Starkwall. So this is it because she had promised Alice some security before she went to Berlin. He's voiced by Derek Valen, and he speaks a lot in shorthand and like in military talk, and it feels very exaggerated in terms of he was told to be exaggerated about how he talks. I feel like he says he got a basic sit rep, possible single unorthodox hostile question mark, which okay, that's a lot of talking. I believe sitrep is situation report, and obviously, unorthodox hostile is, Heinrich und Heimlich is an external. He tells Alice that as operator, he has complete situational awareness of what's happening, and he has to predict any threat vector and focus in on it. And basically says to her, do what he says so that he makes sure that she stays alive. And she's like, all right. She talks sarcastic to him, and he's very oblivious. And he wears sunglasses to avoid glare, despite it being nighttime. There's this moment where, he's saying all this about the mission, how dangerous it is, how he's aware about everything, and he accidentally bumps into somebody, and Alice is like, well, careful there. And he bumps into somebody, and he's like, sorry, excuse me. And it shows how incompetent he is. Really, really fun moment. And then they head out. In scene 2, we switch quickly to the OIAR. Celia and Gwen are alone there, and Celia notes how lonely it feels, how empty it feels in the OIR. She's surprised Alice didn't even say goodbye, and Gwen says that Alice would have left without saying anything if Gwen wasn't paying for the flight. Gwen starts thinking about, hey, maybe we should start hiring new people. And Celia tells her to work on her pitch, and Gwen says that someone has to do it. And Celia sort of turns to her and asks her genuinely, does someone have to do it? And Gwen sort of dismisses her, doesn't answer her question, and leaves. In scene 3, Alice and Dane arrive at a derelict factory. He says the OA has too many sightlines. I believe OA means area of operation. Dane says he will make a sweep, he'll establish an exit route, and then he pulls out this huge gun, which Alice comments on, and he says that he and other operatives have a special Waffenschein weapons license as part of contract work for the German government. Okay, dude. And as he's talking about this, she leaves him, and he calls out that the OA isn't safe. And there's a moment here, I really like it, where, he's talking all this standard military talk, very bravado, and then she leaves, and he's like, wait. And his voice becomes a little bit more real, more realistic, and less of a persona as she's leaving, which I like that moment, because it really does show that this man is incompetent and putting up a farce. He's not lying, but he's it's his first time doing this. In scene 4, Alice opens up the heavy metal door and finds a factory filled with creepy wooden dolls. And Dane does a sweep, says that everything's clear, and Alice is like, are you sure? And he's like, yeah, wooden puppets don't count as hostiles. Okay. Is that foreshadowing? Alice asks what he was told about this job, and he's sort of nervous, and he says that it was a basic sit rep, though it didn't include how, and he sort of lingers, and she says, scary? And he says how unorthodox the RV would be. I'm not sure what RV is. He asks Alice if she sees the contact, and all of a sudden this man appears. Heinrich und Heimlich says that they aren't the visitors that he was expecting. He's voiced by Robert Vernon in a very cool, really interesting performance of Heinrich und Heimlich. When he appears, Dane turns his gun on him, and Heinrich apologizes if he scared him, and he says that Dane's fear is unpalatable. He says it's messy. He speaks to Alice, and she says that Colin's dead. They're not sure how he died, just that he died to something to do with the program he was investigating. And Alice asks how he knew Colin, and he says that a man had contacted Heinrich for the Ministry of State Security in Germany. And he was programming something, and it involved many beings like Heinrich, but he was one of the more amenable ones. And so he was asked some questions and ran some tests, and that was it. And that man's notes somehow landed in Colin's hands, and so Colin wanted to ask some questions. Alice asks why he agreed to speak with Colin, and he says that monsters get lonely, and also Colin was going to help him adapt and expand into video games. He wants to guide Alice to a chair that he had gotten for Colin, like he doesn't sit, so he got a chair for Colin to sit in. But before she can do that, Dane blocks her and asks what he is, and he outright states he is Heinrich Unheimlich. He calls himself the toy that gives children nightmares. And I didn't write this down, but there is a moment where Alice is like, don't you mean a toy maker? And he's like, toy maker, it doesn't make a difference. And he asks if they want his story. And Alice says, yeah, sure, absolutely. And he says, why don't you come sit? The chair was 60 euros. The chair thing is, we keep coming back to this chair. It's just a really funny bit. Dane says he doesn't care about any chair. And Heinrich is like, okay. And he starts his statement, which really cool that episode 40 is the statement of an external, Heinrich und Heimlich, compared to episode 20 last season was the statement of Ink 5 In terms of parallel structure, episode 40 is like episode 10, which is when we first got our encounter with Bonzo Saturday night. And so, yeah, that's just, episode 10, 20, 30 was the finale. And then 40 is Heinrich und Heimlich. So really cool, I don't know, not parallel episodes. Cool moments for the, I guess, benchmark episodes. Heinrich's statement. About 200 years ago, there was a little wooden doll that was long and crude and was burned, and had light-giving splinters and looked creepy. It was owned by a little girl who made the Heinrich und Heimlich rhyme to scare the children. And he speaks the rhyme that was mentioned before. One day, the little girl was gone, and the parents were gone, and they left behind the toy. It was left on the windowsill as it watched the children, and more rumors spread that the little girl had said the rhyme, and Heinrich und Heimlich had come for her. I believe that in reality, the little girl and her parents simply left. I don't think anything bad happened to her. It's just the rumor of. And as he kept hearing more, as the toy kept hearing more, obviously he's talking about the toy in third person, but he is that toy, whatever. As he kept hearing more and more about the fear of the children of Heinrich und Heimlich and the house, he grew happy and satisfied. The old house he was left in fell into deep ruin, and the kids would dare each other to go inside, very much like, go up to touch old man, whatever. What's Boo Radley? Go up to touch Boo Radley's house type thing. And the toy learned that it could hurt them. But to kill a child, it was simply a quick fix but unsatisfying. To scare children is much more interesting. I didn't write this down. It's really cool how it's described how he learned to be still as a toy, but have like subtle movements. Small little movements that like a child that is hyper aware of everything that's happening in this scary house would catch on and, maybe know that they saw something creepy, but also allow themselves to think that it was imagined or whatever, still have that fear of like, oh, it's haunted. It's a creepy place. It's haunted. Let me run away. I did the dare. So as more and more children fled from the house, Heinrich's story grew. And one day, a little boy added to his story, saying that Heinrich und Heimlich was a toy maker and described the toy maker looking in some way. And so the toy had no choice but to become the man as described, and because the man as described was a toy maker, then he began making more toys. And so the little boy who expanded the story, Hans, became the first of his chosen, the children who would tell his story. And so he gave him a hobby horse that he used to scare children. Hans used to scare children. And I'm sure he probably had the same rhyme in that the hobby horse would, I don't know, maybe sing the rhyme or something like that. And another boy, Klaus, didn't believe in Hans and didn't fear Heinrich und Heimlich. And so the hobby horse one night rode out, took Klaus, and made him watch as it killed his parents. And I think it also killed Klaus, but I'm not fully sure about that. I'm going to err on the side of Klaus was left alive. And because of that, kids again began to fear the rhyme. And so Heinrich und Heimlich would begin to give toys to the children that he chose, and they'd spread his story, and the ones who wouldn't believe his story, their parents would die. And so Heinrich's workshop had begun to grow and to change and to move. At one point, a century or two ago, it was a dark hut at the edge of the forest, and the chosen child at that time was Ilsa, who had a gory workshop of making toys, using other children's flesh for the toys making process, and had also a set of toy soldiers, which she used to scare people. And he says that the toy soldiers never actually did anything, or at least didn't get a chance to do everything, because the girl Ilsa was scary enough. But now the last few decades have been harder for him, and children have become more aware, I guess, and less scared of things. It's harder for children to be scared. But he says change is a strange and scary word for a child, and Heinrich und Heimlich will be there to feast on that fear when it comes. And he finishes his statement, Dane is shaken. He is scared. He says, you killed children? And he says that it was rare. Corpses do not cry. And what about the parents? And he says parent killings are also pretty rare. The tale of killing one parent does more than the actual kill itself, as we saw from Klaus's parents. He says, if it were to happen too often, they are no longer stories, they are facts, dull and at risk of inconvenient investigation. And after that, they're sort of like standing around like, okay. Alice comes up to him, offers her hand, and says, my name's Alice. And he says, oh, that's so nice to meet you. I would like to speak with you alone. I am tired of that man over there. We must speak alone. And Dane doesn't want that. He blocks her again, and he points his gun at Heinrich. He grabs his arm, and Heinrich tells him to let go of his arm. He's very calm about it too. Let go of my arm. And Dane says that, and Dane doesn't want to. And so Heinrich kills him in a really fun way.
I'm warning you.
Trottel. Entschuldigung, Fraulein, but I really found that man intolerable.
He was torn apart by the toys, which is really fun. And Dane is dead. Oh my god. He lasted so much shorter than I expected. After that, Heinrich apologizes to Alice and asks if he was a friend of Colin's, and she says no. He says, good. I didn't want to kill a friend of Colin's because he was kind to me. And he says that he can sense Alice's fear, same way that he could sense Dane's fear. But he says that her fear, she holds it back well, but when it does bubble through, it's youthful and pure. And he says that I will enjoy my time with you. Because of that, rightfully so, Alice asks, what do you want from me? And he says, well, I'm pretty sure that you want something from me. You want me to answer your questions. And so he guides her to the new 60-euro chair and wants to answer her questions. And she's like, okay. And the episode ends. Yeah, I really like this episode. It's a really great statement of this external. And Alice she does not feel like she's in over her head here. She knows what she's dealt with before with other externals and knows that this guy is being a lot more nice than what most externals would act like. And so she's ready. She's ready to know more. Dane Bowie, that has to be a fake name. That has to be a fake name. Like Brett Lars, it also sounds like a fake name as well, but not as much as Dane Bowie. Like, come on. And he has no info about the mission. Like, he says that he got a basic situation report, sit rep. he got nothing. They just told him, hey, you're just going to be protecting this girl. It's probably his first mission, too. He's talking all this bravado. He's talking about all this military talk and stuff, and it just feels like he's just telling himself this so he can feel safer. But it all sounds like a joke. It all sounds fake. It all sounds like he's putting on this bravado. He has nothing on Brett Lars. Brett Lars probably has a lot more field experience, and Brett Lars is also hotter and taller too as well. Does this count as a failure of a field test? I wonder if it would or not. And yeah, Lena had said before, the Stark Wall people tend to escalate situations. He definitely escalated the situation, and then he was killed for it. Rest in peace, Dane Bowie. Bring back Brett Lars. The little scene with Gwen and Celia, does the OIR actually need workers? Because obviously they do, because they need to process things, but they are underfunded and understaffed. Even before, like when it was Sam, Celia, Allison, Gwen. It was 4 people doing all that. Now we're down to less than 1. But it just feels like if this is so important, then we would have more money. We would have more people on this, right? So it feels like something fell through the gaps. I'm not sure. Heinrich's statement. So I don't want to assign him to any specific Smirks 14 fears because most of the descriptions in his statement don't really align themselves to any of Smirks 14. However, it's very obvious that the fear that he likes is uncomplicated, pure, childlike. In episode 173, Night Night, in the apocalypse, the children of the world are placed in these sort of dark domains that are used to, what was the term, further refine their fear. Because as children, their minds aren't fully developed, and so any sort of neuroses that they will feed on, the fears will feed on, have to be developed. And Heinrich, to me, just feels like an external that feeds on the fears of children. And that's not, to me, that doesn't really assign itself to any of Smirks 14. Touching on the plot relevant stuff that Heinrich talks about, he talks about a man that was programming something for the Ministerium für Stasi Sicherheit, which is the Ministry for State Security. Episode 19, Hard Reset, we have Colin saying that Freddy, the program, is making mommy and daddy Stasi proud. And so this connects obviously to the Stasi Sicherheit that Heinrich worked for briefly. And it can be surmised that the man who does the programming is the same man spoken about in 38 Circling Back with Friedrich, who was the person who first programmed Freddy that Colin spoke with, and that's how Colin got Heinrich's information. Heinrich says that the man he worked with had information about him that Colin got, and so Friedrich, Heinrich, Colin, all connected there. And yeah, scaring children is better than killing them. He mentions a handful of times how killing one child is like a quick fix, but in the long run, having them fear him is much more productive to him as an entity, as an external, as an avatar that feeds on fear. Because there's been the question of how does this all compare to archives? And it's all fear. It's all fear. We learned that we've been hearing about fear in the past many episodes, but specifically in 27 Driven, fear is important to monsters that are being encountered. Here, again, fear is important. And this all connects the way that Heinrich talked about fear and killing children and killing parents and the rhymes, sort of touching on how fear needs to be able to live. The person that is fearing needs to be able to live, kind of connects to other moments in archives to me. such as in 167 Curiosity, where Fiona Law passes out and she's been able to survive encounters with avatars or monsters because whenever she passes out, the thing that is chasing her doesn't really want her. It wants her to be awake and aware. Episode 71, Underground, Carolina Gorka goes to sleep before she can be fully entombed by the train station. And so she survives because she goes to sleep. 133, Dead Horse, whenever the chase ends, there's no more fear of being chased, of that. And so there's a continuous, never-ending cycle of the ever chase. And also, above all, 168 Roots, the whole conceit of the unrenewable resource of fear with death. Once someone dies, they cannot fear anymore. And so the end has to feed itself by fear of death. And so that means death has to be final. And eventually, others will die in the apocalypse. And so the humans are an unrenewable resource. Which is why Heinrich wants the children to fear him, chooses one or two people to attack and kill every once in a while, chooses the right people to spread the most fear, and keep himself fed. And Colin wanted to help him expand into like video games in a way. So I don't know how that would work out, but that'd be really fun. And yeah, I think this episode's really interesting. It doesn't do much in the overall scheme of things. I honestly wish Heinrich und Heimlich was set up earlier, at least one statement in the past that would have been easily connected to Heinrich und Heimlich, because it definitely feels like a very important moment to have him doing his statement, especially since, like I said, Inc. 5 all gave their statement after like 2 or 3 moments of them appearing. And so, yeah, I just kind of wish that there was a little bit more setup for Heinrich und Heimlich, but otherwise, really great performance by Robert Vernon, and really great performance of Alice as well here. Billy Hindle, you continue to hold my heart for your performance. I adore Billy Hindle and Alice so much. And yeah, I forgot to check to see if there is an actual hiatus or not. So if there is, I'll see you then. Okay, we are back. So for you, viewer at home, this is just the next clip in this video. For me, hi, it's been 2 months since the last episode, episode 40 of the Magnus Protocol. So we're getting back into the rhythm of it with the next episode. It's been 2 months. And I will say, this is my little rant here, I will say last season, episodes 10 through 11, 10 going into 11, there was a hiatus. And episodes 20 to 21, there was also a hiatus. And those hiatuses were only 4 weeks apart. And it was, I mean, I'm all for Rusty Quill giving themselves the time to work on these episodes to make them feel better. Love that. I just wish that the 2-month break between the last episode and this episode made this episode a little bit better. It's not a bad episode at all. It's a very standard episode. I just wanted something bigger for when we come back into it. You know what I mean? I had enough time to just reorganize my shelf as well. So there's that. I knew that I have my succulents. I had placed them here, and then I had to I wanted to reorganize. I needed to reorganize tonight, so I did, and I completely forgot what I was going to do with these. And so it's just I'll do that again for the next cycle of 4 episodes. It is what it is. Either way, I'm really glad to be back because I absolutely adore this show. So let's get into it. Case notes, episode 41, Internal Investigation. CAT1RB 5535 the dates. The description is transmutation parentheses organs / experimentation parentheses metal. CAT1 is an agent, and this is referring to Alana Ward herself or her copy. We'll see about that. Rank B, still don't know what that means. The DPHW, Death 5, Pain 5, Helplessness 3, Weird 5. The date of the event was June 17th, 1995. In fact, that is the date of the witness statement that was given. And the date of the current time is June 10th, 2024. Note that it's the same day as the last episode as well. The author of this episode is Alexander J. Newell. It aired July 3rd, 2025. Brief summary: metal facsimiles, Lena in, and Alice and Heinrich investigate. And entities non-applicable. In scene 1, we are in the OIAR, and Celia is typing up on her, working on her caseload, and Gwen enters, and she starts saying something. Celia interrupts her because she thinks that Gwen is going to chastise her about her caseload. She says that there's 4 team members down, and she's trying her best to get through the cases, and Gwen is like, I wasn't going to talk about that, but now that you are talking about that, we can start talking about. And then Celia interrupts her again, like, what was the original thing that you wanted to tell me about? And Gwen asks her if Celia has heard anything from Alice, who, if you remember from last episode, is in Berlin talking to Heinrich und Heimlich. Celia says that Alice has not contacted her, and there is no buzz in the recording, so we know that it's truth. And Gwen still keeps prodding at her, and Celia sort of laughs. She's like, it's not bad to worry about Alice. Gwen is like, I know that. I'm not worried about Gwen. I just wanted to make sure that that she's talking to somebody, because, their current relationship is not the best. So if Alice was going to talk to somebody, it would be to Celia herself. And Celia's like, well, yeah, true. And Gwen was also worried that Alice would tell Celia to not tell Gwen anything. And Celia was like, oh, she wouldn't do that, which is a lie, is detected as a lie. And then she corrects her. She's like, yeah, actually, Alice would do that. But no, I have not been contacted by Alice at all, which mollifies Gwen briefly. Gwen returns to the office. Celia is a little frustrated, and she bangs on the keyboard in frustration, which begins the next case. In scene 2, Chester/John reads out a witness statement of Dr. Chloe Gemmel. The recording sounds like there's like a B in there, but in the transcript it says Gemmel. In the recording it sounds like Jemble. I'm not sure. Dr. Gemmel is a criminal pathologist, and she's taking her statement at the Greater Manchester Police HQ. And the statement was given June 17th, 1995. She states that on the 9th of July at 9:30 a.m., she goes to a suspicious death in Didsbury, Lancashire. And she meets with a DI, or a detective, and a scenes of crime officer. She obviously calls it SOCO. I didn't know what DI or SOCO meant, so I looked it up, and it's DI is detective investigator, SOCO is scene of crime officer, and the people are named DI Betty Osborne, SOCO David Schaefer, and Grant Chapman. I think David is the superior to Grant. And in this neighborhood, a neighbor smelled chemicals at 2 a.m. and then saw a body at 4 a.m., presumably called paramedics. Paramedics arrived and pronounced the body dead at 4:35 a.m. They took about 30 minutes to get there. And they arrested a suspect at the scene. When Dr. Gemmel investigates, she finds that the kitchen is filled with chemistry apparatus and broken glasses, as if there was a scuffle, a skerfuffle. There is a residue on surfaces and a lot of diagrams for like chemical stuff, and a MLM sales guide for Marconi Alchemics. The dead body is in the doorway of like a utility room, and it's covered in laundry, and it was confirmed dead again by Dr. Gemmel on 10:09 a.m. So the paramedics called the dead, and she confirmed that it is a dead body. It's a middle-aged Caucasian woman, and she's laying on her right side in a fetal position, and her left arm is extended toward the door, and her right hand, I'm sorry if it messes up the microphone, her right hand is clutching at her face. It lists the things that she is wearing, and among the more mundane stuff, she also wears an apron and a plastic eye protector that is logoed and labeled with Marconi Alchemics embroidery on the apron, and then there's a logo on the glasses. There's bloodstains all over her, there's dirt on her hands, there's vomit on her body, and she's covered in sodium chloride, which, if you remember, that's just salt. And swabs were taken. Almost every single thing that is mentioned here, a swab or a portion or something was taken to get investigated later. So there's vomit around her head. So there was a lot of vomit around her, and she's covered by laundry. There's a washing machine next to her. She's like propped against the washing machine, and it's open, and there's still clothes inside it, as if she was pulling clothes out of it. There's also a large glass flask next to her that's bloodstained. I don't really know what that means. I assume that it's just like a chemical glass flask just on the floor, covered in blood. And rigor mortis is in all muscle groups. Her body is so stiff. Her temperature was taken at 10:32. The ambient temperature is 30 degrees Celsius, and the thermometer is 24 degrees Celsius. There is 8 incised wounds at her neck, and 2 wounds indicate strangulation. So I'm not exactly sure what that means in terms of, because incised to me is like you got stabbed, right? And if it's saying that it's strangulation, is that like a thin wire strangulation? I'm not fully sure. I think I'm missing something here. If you know what I'm talking about, what is being talked about, please let me know. And so many swabs and samples are taken before she leaves, and then she has a post-mortem examination on the dead person on July 10th, 1995, the next day. And it is in Stepping Hill Hospital. The examination started at 8:20 p.m. of Alana Ward, the deceased. The decedent is how they are referred to. There are 2 more people present at the examination. It's a constable and a mortuary technician, their names being DC Marco Manson and mortuary technician Kayla DeAngelis. The body arrived wrapped in a sheet and is measured at 165 centimeters, which is approximately 5'5", but weighs at 105 kilograms, or approximately 231.5 pounds. Now, for example, I am 5'10", right? I'm 5'10" feet. I didn't measure that in centimeters. I am 5'10", so I'm 5 feet taller than Alana Ward, right? I am, last I checked, 165 pounds. So she is 5 feet smaller than I am. She reaches about my chest, and she is a little less than double my weight. So that's not normal. Every once in a while, I forget that this is a story wholly based within the UK. And so some of the things are lost in translation. And so when I was listening to it for the first time, I was like, okay, yeah, kilograms. And then it stated within the text that the weight is not what they expected from the height, which, you know, given what we learn about later, makes sense. And also them saying that is enough for us to be like, oh my god, she's heavier. But like, I did the conversions, seeing the conversions, like, oh yeah, that woman was weighed down. Her hair was dyed red, and she had her brown and gray roots starting to grow out, so it's been a while since she got dyed. And there's signs of tearing on her nails. I don't write it down, but I would assume the tearing of her nails being like she's clawing at the person who's strangulating her to get them stop. That's a tearing. She also has 2 vaccination scars, a cesarean scar, and no tattoo. And I do like how this sort of humanizes Alana Ward a little bit. It shows that she is a mother, too. I don't have that in my notes. I forgot to write it down. She is a mother. So her child might be out there, 1995 to 2024. 25? No, it's 24. So it's like 20 years later, that child might be 20 years old. Who knows? At least 20 years old. And there's a sign of a needle taking blood, maybe taking blood, on the inside of her left arm, which looks self-inflicted. And it says right after that injuries all sustained while still alive, but it's said within the statement of more wounds on her neck, which I didn't feel pertinent to add because it's just a lot of wounds on her neck. And so I don't know if the needle was put in while she was still alive. I assume that final line encompasses all those wounds, that all those wounds were sustained while she was alive. There's a minor abrasion on her head, and since of what we discover later is just explained, I think it's implied that how heavy her head was it sort of like landed on the floor and that caused the abrasion. That's probably what that means. And Dr. Gemmell begins the autopsy, and she discovers that her skull is covered in a foul-smelling yellow residue, which she believes is sulfur. She opens up the skull, and the brain is replaced by a silver facsimile, which was taken to further examination. All the organs that she finds is taken to further examination. The face tissue shows signs of a system shock or hypoxia. Her tongue was bitten, and there's metallic discoloration in her mouth lining. And there's damage to her larynx and trachea consistent with strangulation. There's finger marks on her skin, so it seems that it is a person choking her to death. In her chest, there is metallic discoloration on her ribs and a deformed pleural sac, which is, I believe, the thing that is covering the lungs. I looked it up and I couldn't understand what I was seeing, so I believe it's the thing that is sort of covering the lungs underneath the ribs. And that pleural sac was filled with a dense metallic deposit. And when she opened the pleural sac, it dribbled out, and she assumes that it's mercury, which this begins a biohazard procedures that make Dr. Gemmell the only person to be there. She has to be alone because everyone else could be contaminated by toxic metals. And so that's, I thought that was going to lead to somewhere, but she's just doing this stuff on her own and nothing bad happens to her. She finds that the heart was replaced by a gold facsimile. The veins were still connected, and there are no signs of surgery. Every once in a while, she mentions how there are just no signs of surgery. There was the hysterectomy that is mentioned later, and then earlier the cesarean. The body would show signs of surgery, and that's what she would discover. But seeing these organs being replaced, she doesn't discover the scarification from surgery, which is very, very odd. And I don't quite know exactly why, but I did note down that the heart, the golden heart, was taken under supervision of D.I. Osborne. The stomach was normal. She lost 8 Cornish pasty. The intestines were normal. The liver was replaced by a tin facsimile. The kidney was replaced by a copper facsimile. The bladder and generative organs are normal. The spleen was replaced by a lead facsimile. The endocrine organs are normal. The gallbladder was replaced by an iron facsimile. And yeah, that's it. And during the autopsy, her saw was broken during the Y incision, which I believe is the incision that they do when you are opening up the chest, Y. And a trocar, which is a medical device for body fluids, was hard to insert, and both were attributed to unexpected foreign bodies and metal liquid. It's noted that the organs were all weighed and that the weight was listed elsewhere, and that if the organ had a facsimile, then the weight of the facsimile would be there instead. She ends the examination at 2:30 a.m. on the 11th of July. And the toxicology reports confirm all the metals that she had listed out. This woman's really smart with metals. Good for her. She deduces that the time of death was calculated to be at 2 a.m. on June 9th, which does coincide with the smell of chemicals that the neighbor had reported, which is, I was going to say which is good in terms of that it's consistent, but not good for the person, obviously. But she does note that the reliability of this time of death is skewed because of said facsimiles. Dr. Gemmell's final conclusions are such. The victim died of strangulation wounds from foul play. She was choked to death by an attacker. The organs were replaced without surgery, and they occurred before death. The replacement occurred before Alana Ward died. She says that a suspect was arrested, but there must have been a clerical error because it is said that they have the same identity as the deceased woman. So they arrested a woman named Alana Ward. She advises extensive caution because of such toxic materials, and she also lets everyone know, anyone who is in the investigation in the crime scene and also in the autopsy area, get tested for poison because those toxic minerals, toxic metals could be in the air. At the end, Dr. Gemmell doesn't know what she saw, and she tells the police, do not contact her again if anything similar happens, please. And the statement ends. The case ends. In scene 3, in Gwen's office, she pours out a drink from her desk, which is the same drink that she discovered in episode 30. And her computer pings twice, so something arrives, and then it pings again to remind her that, hey, something arrived. And she looks at it and asks Freddy, do I call this phone number? Freddy doesn't answer, and she's like, okay. So she got a phone number, she dials that phone number, and is about to give up when the call is answered by Lena. Lena, her former boss. And she picks up the phone and she says it's her personal mobile. She's a little annoyed at getting a late night phone call, and she's about to hang up, but she begrudgingly asks Gwen how she is. And Gwen lies about everything's fine, everything's good. You don't have to worry about this. I'm better than you, is basically what she was saying. She didn't say that, but she was basically lying about how nothing's bad going on. Lena says that it took her 1 year to get things in order when she took the managerial position. And the important part is to keep everyone safe, which I wouldn't. Okay, I was going to say, like, Gwen has not done that because Colin and Sam and Alice at this point, too, because, But at least Colin and Sam's whole deals happened during the transition between Gwen and Lena, or Lena and Gwen, but I'm pretty sure that people would still look at Gwen for responsibility on those two happenings. And then Gwen sent Alice to Berlin to meet with an external with supervision. He was killed, but that's definitely not keeping her safe. So at least Celia's safe, right? Gwen tries to ask Lena for help, and Lena tells her not over the phone. There's a reason she kept sending letters everywhere. And she says that she'll send her a postcard with a time and place, and tells Gwen to come alone and to bring cash. And she says she only wants to help because she doesn't want the others affected. And she tells Gwen to take the bottle that is in her desk. It's a gift or something like that. And then Gwen's like, I actually drank almost all of it. And Lena hangs up. Last scene, scene 4, we are back in Heinrich und Heinrich's workshop, and he asks Alice how she's finding his chair, and she's like, it's fine, and they get into information sharing. Colin had contacted Heinrich about the Friedrich programmer because Heinrich was listed in the OIR files, I believe it's the OIR files, to be the only quote-unquote safe Angstjäger in Berlin. Angstjäger means fear hunter. Angstjäger, yeah, means fear hunter. When he says that, Heinrich is a little insulted by that label, and Alice agrees that is not the correct label for him, and he's mollified by that. And despite this, Colin was very kind. He liked Colin and wanted to help him, and so he agreed to help find Friedrich. And Alice asks, did you find him? And he's very ominous. He says yes and no. And Alice is like, listen, I am scared of you. However, I'm also really tired of my flight and also tired of the investigation. So please just keep everything straightforward. And he sort of deflates, Heinrich deflates, and he wanted to be scary because he doesn't get to be scary that much, like personally scary. And so he's like, okay, fine, I'll tell you. Love Heinrich. He discovered that Friedrich was not a person. It is a Bezeichnung. Sorry if I mispronounced that, which directly translated is a designation. Alice is also confused at first, and through some back and forth, she realizes that Friedrich is just an update number, and that is not his real name. And the man who built Freddy had the initials KS. Alice is disappointed at this information, and she wants to leave to collect her thoughts. But Heinrich says that he found an address, and he wanted to investigate it. He didn't know what address it was for, and wasn't going to investigate it without Colin. But now that Colin's dead, Alice is here, so he's going to go with her to investigate this address. And she's sort of wary about it. She's I don't know if she doesn't want to investigate with Heinrich because he would be a liability or a distraction. One of the two. The way that she's like talking about, she's like, I'm fine alone. You might be a little too much to handle. She is afraid of him and does not want to be with him anymore, but also like she's mostly Like, I'm fine on my own. You don't have to worry about it. And he's like, no, I insist. And that gets her a little scared. And she's like, okay, yeah, we can go together. And he says, awesome. We are going to take the chair with us. And she says, awesome. He says, we're going to paint the town red. And she says, okay. And the episode ends. So yeah, honestly, I will say this is a fine, good episode. I wish that it was not the episode that breaks the hiatus, because I would want something with more information or more flashy or something else that would help break this hiatus. But it's still a pretty good episode. I've talked about it before, and it's less prevalent here, but I can feel it because it's written by Alexander J. Newell. I can see that list horror that he likes to do, where it's just a bunch of lists, and it helps that alchemy has a lot of stuff about chemicals, so it's just different chemicals, materials, minerals listed. And so, listening to it, the list was broken up every other moment by an organ that was not facsimiled, but it was definitely like brain, metal, skull, metal, intestines, fine, liver, metal. And so I wanted more horror, but the implications are horrifying enough for me. I was listening to this while I was driving, and I was driving. I was like, brain, the heart, the plural sac. Anyways, notes. Gwen is toying again with the idea of hiring new people. I don't know if that's going to come to anything, but this is the second time that she's like, maybe we should hire more people. The case takes place in Manchester, 1995. This is very close to the Magnus Institute. The Magnus Institute was burned down in 1999 and is located in Manchester. So there's nothing in this statement that alludes to the Magnus Institute beyond just the idea that it's alchemy, but alchemy, Manchester, 95, all to me is like, hey, this is somehow connected to the Magnus Institute, but obviously there's no confirmation as to that. Marconi Alchemics, obviously some sort of organization that sells alchemical stuff, and that's maybe Alana Ward worked for them as well. I looked up Marconi to see if anything pops up. I didn't do a lot of research, but I did find a Guglielmo Marconi, who is the inventor of the wireless telegraph. And the only connection there is that there was a telegraph in an episode prior, so 22, I want to say. But that's not enough for me. When I first listened to the episode, the first thing that I thought of was Tim Marco, Dr. Marco from Full Metal Alchemist, which we already had an Elric name drop in 2 episodes prior, and Marco felt a little similar to me, but I think I'm a little reaching here. There might be something I'm missing. So there are 2 different things that I wanted to note about the death. So Alana Ward was dying from organs transmuted into metals, and it's stated that it happened before she died. It's not stated how long before. I don't think they would be able to find that, but definitely like, hey, your brain, heart, liver, etc. being transmuted into a metal, definitely not very healthy. And also, someone strangles her, and I wrote in my notes, her duplicate strangles her, because it's stated that the suspect was arrested also is Alana Ward, or the identity is Alana Ward. And so we've had duplicates appear before, and so that might be a duplicate killing her to replace her. I'm not fully sure. It stated that there was phlebotomy on her arm, which was the needle in her arm. So that could either mean drugs, blood drawing, or injecting chemicals, ? So it says phlebotomy specifically. So does that mean drawing blood or giving blood? But also I would assume, in the arm for like drugs, but also maybe injecting yourself with chemicals to kickstart the transformation of your organs, maybe, I don't know, or try to stop the transformation of organs, but the chemical failed or something. It's not stated if that happened before or after her death or something like that. And because she's laid up against the washing machine with clothes all over her, it implies that this all happened, that she died as she was taking laundry out. So it was all a surprise. This was unplanned, I guess, on her part. And then either her body just started transforming into organs, and then I'm just going to say random person comes in, strangles her. The person who is taking her identity maybe strangles her to death, right? Because her death was strangulation. But I would assume that having your organs turned into metal would also be a factor in some bad feeling. So I'm not fully sure exactly what happened. I think there is something that I'm missing in terms of the positioning of the body and the organs, the specific organs chosen, and the different clues around. I'm not a mystery person. I can't really tell what the mystery is here. So if someone knows exactly what's happening, please let me know. I listed it out, so I'll show. I thought it would just be fun. All of the organs that were transmitted into which metal and what alchemical symbol it corresponds to that I found online. So it might be an inaccurate symbol. Body was covered in salt, sodium chloride, salt. Listen, I have the picture here anyways. Yeah. The skull was covered in sulfur. The brain was turned into silver. The symbol for silver, I'm not fully sure if that's correct. When I saw many different ones, I'm not fully sure. The kidneys were turned into copper. The gallbladder was turned into iron. The pleural sac was filled with mercury. The heart was turned into gold. The liver was turned into tin. The spleen was turned into lead. I didn't write it down, but the idea that the organs turned into different metals, that the liquid turned into different liquid metals, is terrifying, really cool. It reminded me of Alex Garland's Annihilation, Jeff Vandermeer's Annihilation, in terms of random mutation creating random individual appearances. I have to do a lot more research to see if the organ that transformed into a specific metal means something. I'm sure other people will do that, so I will see if other people do that. But if the specific, like the brain turning into silver, means something specific, if there's some connection between brain and silver, or if there's some connection between the organs that were transformed and the organs that were not transformed, such as the intestines, if there's a correlation there, I'm not fully sure. But either way, I think it's a lot more interesting if there was just a random, there's a biological term, I'm forgetting what it was, sort of like radiating mutations of the organs into metal, of like just random transmutation that were caused by some sort of chemical reaction, because obviously Alana Ward was doing something with chemicals, Marconi alchemics, etc. And so it's definitely like something happened, some sort of reaction happened within her that may have led to her death. I have like this slight idea that maybe this was also a mercy killing, that whoever killed her so that she wouldn't feel so much pain from the metals. But it also feels weird. I don't think it is because of how the staging of the murder, her taking out laundry, feels very random, instead of like, oh my god, I'm dying, hey best friend, come choke me to death. Also probably better ways to kill someone than choking. The strangulation feels personal, feels like anger, and it's like, hey, maybe if you are a duplicate of someone, you're a little angry about, hey, why are you doing this? Why are you my duplicate? Why are you the real person and I'm not? Let me strangle you and replace you. Don't know. There's a lot of information coming here at once. But yeah, like the organs turning into metals remind me a lot of Annihilations, like different organisms turning into different organisms just randomly. And that's sort of terrifying. And that is sort of like a cosmic horror type thing. Like all of a sudden you do something and your spleen is lead. Oh no, my spleen is lead. That's a little bit more terrifying than like, oh my god, the kidneys mean something in terms of copper, so it turned into copper. I don't know exactly anything about alchemy, so I don't know.
Lena is helping Gwen, which means more information incoming, which, for me, this little moment makes a little bit more sense as to why this is breaking the hiatus, in terms of we have a character that has not appeared since the last episode of the first season. 10 episodes later, she's coming back. Lena is back. And since then, within these last 10 episodes, Gwen has been struggling with being a manager, struggling with information that she doesn't have that she would have gotten from Lena if she hadn't kicked Lena out. And now she's dealing with the repercussions of that. Now, episode 41, Lena's back and ready to help Gwen, just trying to help the others not get affected, which I would love to see her reactions to hearing that Colin's dead, Sam's gone, Alice is in Berlin. So, like I said, Angstjäger, Fear Hunter, he also says your file. So Heinrich says that your files labeled him as a safe Angstjäger. And so I would assume that your files means that Colin found Heinrich und Heimlich through the OIAR files, which would make sense because the OIAR is based off of Freddy, which is where Heinrich und Heimlich came in and stuff. I'm not fully sure there, but yeah, Colin found Heinrich und Heimlich in the OIR files, listed him as a Angstjäger, Fear Hunter. Come on, Fear Hunter, Avatar, External, etc. That's all the same idea, And finally, German programmer, KS. Is that Klaus? So we saw in episode 4, taking notes, Gwen got a video randomly of Lena trying to kill a Klaus. And then episode 7, Give and Take, she shows Lena this video to blackmail her into getting her as a externals liaison. And so we know that this man that Lena tried to kill was Klaus, and Klaus escaped. And we also know that Klaus used to be the IT guy in the OIR, so it makes sense that this is the same Klaus who programmed Freddy. Don't know yet, but that's definitely a clue there. KS. When I was listening to the episode while I was driving, I heard AS, and I was like, who the fuck has initials AS? But no, it's KS once I read the transcript. And yeah, that is it. And it's been 2 months since the last episode, and this is the episode we get. It's a fine episode. Just wish for better. Next episode, it's going to be better. I'm putting it. I'm manifesting. It's going to get better, and I can't wait to share this with y'all. So, let's see you soon. All right. This one's a short one. It felt pretty short when I was listening to it, honestly. I ate my breakfast while I was listening to it this time. And yeah, I really like this episode. There's one little thing that gets on my nerves a little bit, but I really like this episode. Episode 42, Hostile Workplace. CATXXXX, and the non-applicable dates. The description is error, parentheses, unknown source. The CATXXXX is non-applicable. The rank is non-applicable. The death, pain, helplessness, and weird are all X's. And the date of the incident and the date of assessment are both non-applicable. The author of this episode is Jonathan Sims. Air date is July 10th, 2025. Brief summary, archivist eyes and skeleton. And the entities are the eye. In scene 1, everything is within a tape recorder. Sam tries waking Alice, and Georgie returns, having chased away the archivist but lost it as it ran away. She says, it runs too fast. Alice wakes up really groggy. She feels like she's had a hangover. And Georgie is going to call Melanie to get a med team, and then reacts to Sam's arm, which is just covered in eyes. Which, I love that. And apparently the archivist had grabbed his arm very briefly as it was fleeing, and that left the arm covered in eyes. So they move aside to hide the eyes from Alice, and I will say, they hide it from Alice. Alice is all groggy and shit, and then a little later, she's still there. She doesn't react at all to his arms being covered in eyes. I feel like there should have been a moment where she's like, oh my god, what is that? Sam asks about the eyes, and Georgie says that that's a new thing. She's not seen that before, but she assumes that it's going to have to be dealt with somehow. Georgie leaves him to prepare to lance the boils of the eyes. And Sam checks on Alice, and in that little moment, Alice asks him to work things out with his Alice in his own world. And he's kind of cagey about it, but it's definitely like, he definitely does feel for this Alice and sees what could have been. And the archives, Alice says that they went through an apocalypse together, and that really helped their relationship. And I'm not saying that should be advice as to how to make your relationship good, but it's definitely advice given. Georgie returns with a needle. She had Melanie call in a med team, and the med team told her, you need to deal with eyes first. And she heated the needle over the stove to, sterilize it. That's it. And some rubbing alcohol. She never used rubbing alcohol, or at least not that we saw. Anyways. And she tells Alice to hold Sam as she begins to the eyes. And listen. Horrifying. Disgusting. The screams that Sam has as he's biting down on the bit. Love that. Hate that. And then he passes out. So that's done. I hope that it doesn't come back, but I also do hope that it does come back, because that was really horrifying. In scene 2, they are in the med ward, and Sam is scratching at his bandages. Melanie comes in. She tells him, do not scratch at your bandages. There's a quick moment where he's like, you don't know how... And then he stops. And I don't know if they told him that Melanie poked her own eyes out, but it's definitely like, hey, her eyes got poked out somehow. And he's like, he was going to say, you don't know how it feels to have your eyes poked out. Hey, Sam. At least he has some tact to recover from that. But anyways, Melanie says the doctors aren't worried about his arm, so he shouldn't be worried. She's not worried. She also hasn't seen anything like this before. She says, as a way to like make him feel better, I guess, that a rookie a couple of years ago got stuck within the zone for like a hot minute, and then a face started growing from somewhere. She's vague about where it's growing from, and I want to be dirty and say it was like somewhere private, probably like on his back or his stomach or his butt, one of those three. Sam asks, and Alice is sleeping elsewhere in the ward, getting better. So, at least knowing where people are, Alice is in the warden compound. Has that been named? And since Georgie and Melanie have never seen this before, they call in the big guns, and Georgie walks in with Basira! I want to express my emotion in a true way, but I also don't want to be that loud for my neighbors and for the microphone. So, Also, my notes have exclamation points to show how excited I was about Basira. Yeah. So, Melanie, Georgie, and Basira were the last people alive who have dealt with their archivist before. And so there's really great scene where they're just popping ideas back and forth between each other about what's happening, trying to understand what's happening, asking Sam questions, and trying to come up with theories and ideas. Basira questions if it's John or his double, so John in the protocol verse. They don't know that. Georgie saw the archivist and says that it was too transformed to really tell. And knowing that it looks not human that much, but still has a voice to it that's female. Beth Erie. Don't know yet. Melanie fills Sam in about John because they ask, is it John? And Sam's like, who's John? Melanie fills him in about John in the archives. He was a colleague. There's a cute moment here where Melanie is like, John was a colleague, and Basira says he was a friend. Point blank, period. And Melanie lands somewhere in the middle and says he was a guy. He was a guy that worked in that institute where they worked as well. He got involved into supernatural stuff along with them, but even more so. Got changed, led to the incursion, which they've mentioned this prior to Sam. I don't know if he's connecting the dots, but Melanie mentioned that in episode 37 Scrutiny that most of the entire world thinks that the London incursion was caused by a posh British guy. So And he returned everything in the world to normal, but he died along with a friend. And Basira says that they disappeared, and Georgie stops from another argument from spilling out. We'll get back to that. Sam explains when it escaped, mentioning episode 10, Saturday Night, when he and Alice went poking around in the Institute ruins. And they say that the timelines don't match, but Melanie points out that the timelines don't really have to make sense. Time doesn't really make sense, as they know. So even if the timelines don't really make sense, doesn't really discount anything. Georgie asks if the Institute served the eye, which Sam is confused and says that it was more into alchemy, and says that it is, well, Georgie asks, you mean like lead into gold? And Sam says it's lead plus fear into gold. So we'll come back to that. And he asks, what's this about an eye? What eye? Basir briefly explains the dread powers. She mentions the corruption, the spiral, the hunt. Melanie asks if that is how it works in protocol, and he disagrees. Sam's job categorized these events into very specific listings, and he references 28 interruptions where he is outside in the rain and gets attacked by the archivist and has to tell his story about seeing Dr. Welling's skeleton pull out of its body. And Melanie says it's the flesh. Basira throws out the buried, maybe. And he says that his index labeled it as alchemy, cross-reference with human bones or something else. He's not fully sure about that. And they continue asking about it, and he's like, actually, well, that's set up for something else that I experienced. And he gets into a statement, scene 3, after that event, after experiencing Dr. Welling being torn apart. Sam had a skeleton phobia, obviously. He says that it might be a little funny, but like no one else saw the skeleton that was fresh and bloody with fat and muscles still clinging to them, which, yeah, actually that would cause me to have fear about that too. He had this intense phobia as a kid after that, and he avoided mentioning it in case he got bullied. His parents didn't really understand it, but they dealt with it. And he got better as he got older. Eventually, he trained to become a lawyer working with Ackman Blaine. And there's 3 others on the team with him as paralegals, and they did not get along. And their names, it was Anastasia Rusings, Natasha Merrill, Anthony, last name he does not remember, which I think, honestly, okay, we'll come back to that. I'm going to write it down for me to remember. But the only one he sometimes got along with was Natasha, who was sometimes nice to him. And after 6 months, he had insomnia, depression, and burnout because of the hard work he had to do in this law firm. And during Halloween, Anthony began to hang skeleton cartoons on the desks, and Sam cried at his desk in reaction. And Natasha sympathized with him and had them take it down. He told Natasha, I have a skeleton phobia, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, she's been really nice to me, so she should be fine, right? And then 1 month later, Anastasia asks him to go into the stationery cupboard, lures him into the stationery cupboard, which is not something odd. He would usually do that because he's tall, she was short, whatever. Asking for his help. And when he goes in there, the 3 of them close the door and begin laughing at him. And he was confused, but he was like, I'm trying to leave. And he turns around, and inside the door is a green glow-in-the-dark skeleton. And he begins to feel fear, but he taps it down because he doesn't want them to hear his reaction. He knows it's a prank. He's like, I don't want to give them the benefit of reaction. And then all of a sudden, he says, it was like the fear inside me mixed with something, became something new, not just inside me anymore. And then the skeleton peeled off of the door, and he said it began dancing, like spooky, scary skeletons dancing. And he screams, obviously. And then 10 seconds later, Jean Pierce, the boss there, opens the door and frees Sam, but his face was already covered in paper cuts, implying that the skeleton had in those 10 seconds. Scene 4, he doesn't know how it all fits into the system. As he's saying this, I could hear the soundscape around them stop going into when he started his statement. It got a little quieter, as if we're going into the statement world, as we usually do when we go into the cases, etc. And then we come back into the ambiance of the real world. And Melanie agrees that no, it does not fit within the system that they know. Basira clocks that he just gave a statement. She's like, did anyone here else notice that? And Georgie knows that her entire squad has become a little bit more eloquent since the archivist has arrived, but it seems to be a general effect near the zone. So here, we'll come back to, we're coming back to what I was talking about with Anthony. Sam not remembering his last name feels a little incongruous with what we should know about avatars, the archivist, taking statements from people, because, well, there is the actual idea that he fully did not remember his name, so he couldn't do it, but usually the archivist, John, would be able to pull last names from people, even if they didn't really pay attention to last names. And so I feel like it's less of the archivist pulling something from Sam here, but more of like the general effect of the archivist beginning to change the zone, which is when we get into the conversation a little bit later. Melanie asks Sam to just finish his story, finish his job. He says that he got fired by David. There's a David there. It's just mentioned once. He got fired by David, I guess a different boss. Georgie says the archivist is not working the same as John did before, and Sam says that it's different from his own protocol universe as well, because the eyeballs are new. The archivist may be affected by the eye, or vice versa. Basira says that the eye is no more, it's gone, but Georgie says that the archivist might change that. And so if we get into the idea that the zone is pushing out an eloquence vibe, eloquence field around, the archivist is sort of changing how the zone is affecting the outer world. And so that's definitely something to worry about. And all four of them get ready to face the mess ahead of them. But the three women agree Sam cannot have a gun. And the episode ends. It's a pretty short episode. It seems like Sam and Georgie had interrupted the archivist from feeding from Alice. And in that fleeing, it touched Sam's arm and made him have eyes, etc. And so the eyes on his arm. Every once in a while I see people talking about, oh my god, I forgot that this is a horror. And like, yeah, honestly, sometimes both in archives and in protocol, there are moments where there's like some horror that feels slower, conceptually horrifying, and then other times there's like, oh, that's a horrifying moment happening. And this is one of those. And those are less common than the conceptually horrifying episodes, but having the eyes covering the arm and the popping of the eyes, loved that so much. Basira's back. Shout out to Frank Voss. Love Basira and love Frank Voss as Basira. We last saw Basira in episode 24, Raising Issues, where Celia, who found Basira's name, and or quote unquote found. Oh my god, I forgot to note. So we know that in the recording in protocol, we notice when there's lies happening. We notice when someone lies because there's a little sound that occurs, like a glitch. In this episode, there's a moment where Alice asks Sam, is your arm okay? And he's like, oh yeah, it's fine. And he's obviously lying, but there is no glitch. And I haven't noticed it either prior, but there hasn't been a situation where I'm like, is this person lying or not? Like in protocol in the OIR, when there's many chances for us to question if someone is lying or not. But here, there's that moment that it marks even obvious lies. In the OIR, there's been moments where there's been very obvious lies that it has still marked as a lie, even if the characters know that it's a lie, right? Here, Sam tells Alice, my arm's fine. That's a lie. It does not mark that he's lying. So that's something to note as well, that these lying things have not appeared. If I am wrong, please let me know, but have not appeared when there's a tape recorder going on. So, interesting. Why did I start talking about this? Oh yeah, Celia. Celia lied about finding Basira's name. That's where I got that from. Celia lied about finding Basira's name, and that led Sam and Celia to meet Basira at the school that she works at. And so that's where she was last there. She doesn't know anything. She's not connected to anything in protocol. But in archives, she's back. I wonder where she was. They never say, but I wonder where she was. I wonder where Rosie is. Rosie Zampano and the Admiral were last heard about in the very end of season of the show. She was taking care of him. Where are they? They won't mention Martin for some reason. Like, I don't think it means anything, but the way that when first Melanie was talking to Sam about the London incursion, she did say that two friends died. Doesn't mention their names, doesn't mention John and Martin. Here they start talking about John, they don't mention Martin at all, and so I'm worried about why. It might just be a sort of like, we don't want to talk about the dead sort of thing, we're still grieving sort of thing, but we'll see if they mention Martin later. We get confirmation that John and Martin's bodies were not found. Like, there was enough in the end of the show where it was like, we don't know where John and Martin are, but here it's like definite, like, hey, the bodies are gone. And Melanie, Georgie, Basira, they're talking about it in this episode. There's enough to show that there has been past arguments of if they are dead or not. Basira fully believes they disappeared and cannot confirm that they are dead. But Melanie and Georgie both agree that they are dead. And so I think that's, I like that. I like that a lot. Sam's indexing of his statement. So two things here. One, what he says, it's like alchemy with like human bones or something. Not entirely correct, but he doesn't remember it, obviously. And I checked, and it's transmutation, parentheses, human, // or cross-referenced with ceremony, parentheses, academic. And I can tell I can tell that what he's trying to say is trying to be that. But number two, how did he get that? Did he see that his statement was recorded into Freddy? Because he seems to have meta info about something that was tape recorded, right? So I can understand if he said like, oh yeah, there was this statement, this case about a woman who put some coral in her body, and a copy of her appears and takes over her life and is evil. And this was the index of that episode 23, New You. But he doesn't do that. He does specifically an episode that it's his statement being recorded by the archivist. I would assume that, based on what he said, he goes back into OIR sometime later, checks on Freddy, and says, oh, there's this case that was logged that I did not log. And I look at it, and it's a recording of me. I should mention that. Oh, what is the indexing here? Transmutation? Ceremony? What? And then, Burundun, he's in archive, and he remembers that. But when did he know that? Is his statement in Freddy in the records of the OIAR? How would he know what this is indexed? How does he know what the description of this episode 28, is? He shouldn't, unless there's something that is not being shown to us, such as his recording, his voice being in the cases that they have processed for the OIR. If that is the case, that's perfectly fine. If the tape recording gets onto the OIR cases and they can see that someone else has categorized it, that Freddy has assessed the case, perfect. That's fine. That's creepy. That fits with how the story is. But they don't do that. They don't show that. So how did he know about the index? And how does he react to that? You know, those are two different things there that are a little bugging me here, because now you're pulling into some meta information that the character should not know about. I don't know. It might be explained a little later, but I don't know. The skeleton in the closet. I would assume that Sam is marked by the entity, whatever the entity catalog is. It's still eldritch power that feeds on fear. Is fear. He's been marked by the entities, and when he's in that closet and he's feeling really afraid, he's feeling the same fear he felt when he saw Dr. Welling's skeleton, it probably activated something, which made the skeleton lift up and try to attack him because it's trying to make him fear more. Fear as a catalyst for change caused glowing skeleton to attack. So that's what I wrote down. So we saw before there was the connection here. Georgie asked, "You mean lead to gold for alchemy?" And he says, "Lead plus fear into gold." And so it seems to be that fear is obviously the impetus. We saw that in prior episodes where fear was talked about. 27 Driven, Jonah Magnus says like, "Hey, fear is the necessary thing that we need for our great work. Fear is the catalyst for everything." Now that we have to start focusing on the alchemy and chemicals and minerals and like what minerals are present here. So I looked up what makes these skeletons glow, and there's no exact answer, but based on the U.S. Energy Information Administration, I saw that most things that glow in the dark, materials, toys that glow in the dark, contain phosphor. Not phosphorus, phosphor. Phosphor is made of copper or silver activated zinc sulfide. So, yeah, that, at least I gotta know that. So, yeah, I maybe in future episodes there will be something specific that we can be like, this is a chemical, this is a mineral, this is something that has appeared before, because so far this season not many things have been reoccurring, and I need more things to reoccur. And lastly, fuck those 3 paralegals. Fuck them for messing with my Sam. I know I've been really hard on him for his lack of maturity, lack of tact, but hey, if someone tells you they have a phobia, don't mess with that. Also, he said that his family was well off, but their families were definitely rich, and they got this job based off of connections, which was like, fine, whatever. Be good people, please. That's all I'm saying, paralegals. I'm speaking to paralegals specifically because I'm totally sure that many paralegals watch my videos. Be nice people. Be kind to people. That's all I'm going to say about that. And that is all of the last 4 episodes of Magnus Protocol. These 4 episodes were interesting. We got Heinrich Unheimlich. Loved Heinrich Unheimlich. Alice in Protocolverse. Doubles. People duplicated in Protocol and Archives universe. So cool. And I know that this is simply just setup for later. I can feel the setupness of these episodes for later. And I think the highlight here obviously has to be Heinrich Unheimlich, because he's made such a big impact in such a small amount of time. Loved Heinrich Unheimlich. So, thank you so much for watching. Please look out for my other videos. I am still working on the entity exploration videos. I hope to put out the next entry within the next month. Also working on Book That Changed Me video. Some apartment stuff popped up, and so that affected my schedule, and so some stuff might slow down. And also, I know that I'm going to be in school again in late August, and so that will also slow down production, but I know it's easier to keep up with my thoughts, ideas, and theories for the Magnus Protocol episodes, etc., etc. That'll be easier to keep up with, or easy to keep up with, even while I'm still having classwork. So there's at least these will still keep going on, unless there's another 2-month-long hiatus. But at least by then I'll have a video out then, because the 4, it's easier there. I'm also making a handful of booktube videos, trying to get into the booktube space, because listen, I love reading. I love talking about books and podcasts, movies I might get into sometime, but I don't know how to capture stuff from movies. Books are easy to talk about. So I'd love for y'all to check out my booktube videos as well. I just love talking about books. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments what organ of yours would change into which toxic metal. Mine, I think my heart would change into beryllium. Is that a toxic metal? I don't know. Let me know in the comments which organ would change into which toxic metal. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Share with your friends. Let me know what you think about this. Don't forget to be passionate, and I'll see you later.